Today we're going to be talking about AP English Language and Composition Unit 4, the rhetorical situation, overarching theses, and comparisons in writing. So on the channel, we've done the first 3 units of AP Lang, as well as talking about some of the essays and other things you'll encounter on the exam. Today we're going to be going into Unit 4 of the exam, so we're going to be talking about a lot of the things that are presented when they're teaching the 4th unit. Something I said about AP Lang in a lot of these videos is that the units aren't as cookie cutter as, for example, the history, where it's like by year, or like for physics, where it's by topic. For a class like this, it's very much about building on the ideas. So the rhetorical situation was Unit 1, and we've been building on that since then. Understanding theses really became a thing in Unit 2, and we've been building on that since then. So this unit is very big about understanding a lot of the topics that we've already done in the context of the essays you'll be writing on the exam. So something the College Board really wants you to understand for this unit is starting to become familiar with the 3 essays you'll have to write. So that's a big piece of this. And in this video, we're not going to go into the 3 essays. I believe on this channel, I already spoke about, I think, the rhetorical analysis essay. I think that's the one I did. However, I'm going to be doing a video on the argumentative essay soon. So that's going to be another video coming up. But this video, we're really going to be talking about some of the skills that they talk about. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So what is the rhetorical situation? So this is our Unit 1. So this is the way in which an author uses rhetorical strategies to sway an argument. So again, this is rather simple. This includes any literary devices used in argumentative essays. The rhetorical situation is an ideal you'll see in everything you'll pretty much read ever. However, you'll see some sort of rhetorical device. However, it's mainly used in arguments, or it's more commonly pointed out and studied in arguments compared to other things. However, the rhetorical situation is always used, but it's more common in arguments because it's more easy to pick out. And it's extremely important in connecting the author to the audience, because the rhetorical situation, understanding things like when was this written, what audience is it written for, things like that really help explain, oh, why is this argument good, or why is this being written, or how is this being written, or what is the point of trying to make that isn't just on the paper. Because a writer can't always say every single thing they want to say, so this idea really helps break that down further. So understanding rhetoric. So there's 6 types of rhetoric. This is what we went through in our first unit. There's exigence or demand. It will go by either name. Exigence is more common on the AP exam though. And this is what caused the piece to be written. This is, in my opinion, the most challenging one to understand. But this is what made this piece be written. A lot of the time this will be in reference to speeches or documents. So for example, what the exigence for the Declaration of Independence will be things like the Townshend Acts or the higher taxes or anything that led to America feeling they had to become independent. The purpose, why was it being written, audience, who was written for, context, the circumstances surrounding, writer, who was writing it, or the author, and then the message, what does the author want the audience to take away? All of those are rather simple. I think exigence is the only one that's a little bit more of an outlier, and one that is sometimes a little bit harder to wrap your brain around, but even so, it should be rather simple. This is a graph the AP uses quite constantly. I think it's a very good one. You'll see either way the text is at the center of it. However, on the left side, you'll see how the text is revealing something about the writer, and then the audience will then kind of consider it and then determine the choices which shape the text. So that's one way to look at it. Or it can go the other way, and it reveals the audience and determines the writer's choices, impacts the reader, and examines the text. So either way, it's about revealing things which the audience or the writer's choices will then be evaluated and then will alter the way someone reads the text. So either way, it's going to be doing the same thing. The only difference is that it depends how it's being done. So it can either go from the writer to the audience to the choices, or from the audience to the writer's choices to the reader. Either way, it will do the same thing though. But it's all about altering the text, the way the text is perceived, because the text can only do so much. The way it is perceived is the big idea of the rhetorical situation. So what is an overarching thesis? So this is the main idea of an essay, and all pieces of evidence can fall under this idea or category. So this is what your essay is completely based on. Everything about your essay should be able to fall under this overarching thesis. And it's the most general way to understanding an essay. Every essay must have one. It must correctly answer the prompt in one statement. So your overarching thesis for anything should have everything in your essay under that one statement, and your essay breaks it down into further and further and further and further subcategories. But your overarching thesis should be the biggest thing that is linking your essay together. That should be your overall thing. One sentence about your essay, that's your overarching thesis. I feel like this is a rather simple idea. The final thing we have to talk about for this unit before we go into multiple choice is the purpose of comparisons in writing. So comparisons are a key way to offer evidence and explain arguments. So when you're trying to present evidence for an argument, let's say you're using your overarching thesis, but you don't know how to present it well, you can use comparisons. You could say, in 2016, this stat was higher than in 2012. And that's a piece of evidence that benefits your argument. That's a very easy way to do that. It also helps provide a similar structure that the reader can often follow. So what this means is, like, when you're reading your evidence, sometimes a lot of different ideas can get mixed up in the evidence because evidence is normally trying to present so many different ideas so quickly. So having comparisons is like, oh, this is one idea compared to this. It's very simple, and readers are very good at pointing out comparisons. And it uses similarities and differences to help present evidence in support of theses. So in my opinion, it's a rather simple idea. Comparisons in writing are rather simple. I'm guessing you've all seen them, and I'm guessing you've all used them in writing. However, on the 3 essays on the AP exam, as we'll go more into when I make my video on the argumentative essay, which will most likely be my next video, that will then really talk about why you should be using comparisons. Because if you're not using comparisons, your argument might fall flat a little. So I think comparisons is a very strong skill that you should learn to use as a writer. So now we're going to be moving on to AP questions. So right here is a document. This is one of the biggest documents that are like for the unit for like the practice questions, I guess. There are 5 multiple choice questions for this. I think I picked 4 for the slides here. So you guys can pause here quickly, read through the text, and then we'll move on to the multiple choice. So at this point, I hope you could have paused it, and we're going to move on to multiple choice. So the first question is, which of the following statements most directly expresses the author's thesis in the passage? So we're just going to read the sentences, and we're going to see which one presents the thesis. So if you read the thing, you probably understand what the thesis is. However, this is the entire idea of overarching theses that we spoke about earlier. So A, it is easy to dogmatize, but it's not so easy to define, explain, and demonstrate. That's not anything. That's not stating a thesis. The natural laws for government, well-being, and progress of mankind seem to be equal and are equal. That's not a good answer either, because it's not terrible, but that's not what the piece is about. We cannot have the fruit or flowers, but we often have flowers without fruit. That's not good. It doesn't say anything. And real excellence often comes unheralded from unexpected quarters. So that's the correct answer. D is going to be the correct and pretty obvious correct answer. However, just to further explain why it's not B, even though it's saying natural laws for the government, well-being, and progress of mankind seem equal and are equal, that's not what the piece is about, even though that could be a thesis. The other A and C cannot be a thesis of any essay. I guess it could actually, but they're not good theses. B could be one, but it's still not strong. D explains exactly what the essay is going to be about. However, if you go back, this is all for paragraph 1. Each of these answers are for paragraph 1. So whichever one's normally the last is a safe bet if you're going to just have to guess. Moving on to question 2. In the second paragraph, the author develops a comparison between life and 1,000 arrows shot from the same point and aimed at the same object, primarily to suggest A, people exhibit remarkable diversity in their development over time. That's a good answer. We might go with that one. I'm not sure yet, though. B, seemingly different objects have surprisingly similar characteristics. That's not going to be the right answer, very simply, because 1,000 arrows shot from the same point and aimed at the same object is showing how they're all aimed for the same point, but they're not always going to hit the same point, because if you go back to the piece, it explains that they're not always going to hit the same area, even though they're shot and aimed at the same point. So even though different objects, that's not right. It would be same objects have different characteristics, so that's not it. C, talented people often fail to recognize valuable opportunities. No, that's not it at all. That has nothing to do with it. And D, most great men have emerged from humble origins. That one could be it, in theory, the idea of like going from different ideas but straight. But again, it's saying everyone starts from the same point. So this thesis saying that 1,000 arrows going to the same, starting and ending at the same point, but they're flying off their paths, exhibit a remarkable diversity in their development over time. So the answer here is going to be A. This is a more challenging one, but it still isn't that terrible. As long as you understand the idea of the quote, then you should be fine. But again, you have to use the context of the paragraph to do that. In the context of the passage as a whole, the author's comparison between the qualities of people and of metals primarily serves to do what? So in 5 to 6, as you guys read, there is a comparison between people, metals, and their qualities. So what does it serve to do? So does it A, explain why some people are seen as great starting from birth? Not really. It could be about how like both are the same, but I wouldn't say that's a great answer. B, limit the author's earlier remarks about greatness to a certain subset of people. That has nothing to do with it. Even though that could be a fine answer, it's not what it's about at all. C, challenge the audience's likely belief that the world is inherently fair. I doubt that the audience's likely belief that I doubt that the author believes that the audience believes that the world is inherently fair. I think most people actually believe that the world isn't fair, or that people are born of different things and they have to go from different starting stages. So I actually don't think C is a good answer at all. D, reinforce the author's overarching claim about ordinary people's capacity for success. So if you read, again, you can't get the answer just from reading that question. You have to go back in the passage and look. However, D is without a doubt the best answer, and it is the answer. Because D is about, this is how different things, how metals can start and get moved to things, how people are similar to that. Everything else, I think A is the only other decent answer, but A isn't even a great answer because it's not what it's talking about. It's talking about how things can be grown from something small to something great, how everything started from the same point can be molded into something even better. And that's really what D is saying. That's really what this passage and that comparison is about. And again, this is about comparisons. This was what our final slides were about. So you're seeing how what we're going over prior to the multiple choice is showing up in the multiple choice, and eventually how you can use that in your essay. But again, the people and metals is a great comparison that you can use. Obviously, it probably won't make sense in your essay, but it's a great idea, like how you can compare an object to a person, or idea, how a physical idea can be more to a metaphysical idea. Time for our last question. Which of the following best describes the function of the first two clauses of the passage's final sentence? It is natural, ... despised, in the context of the passage as a whole. So let's just read that quickly, actually. So where is that? It is natural to revolt a squalor, but we may well relax our lip of scorn and contempt when we stand among the lowly and despised. So what is this saying? So is it saying A, they suggest that there are certain limitations to the author's argument about greatness? It could be. I think this is the most challenging question just based off the bat. I think this one could be the answer. I don't think it's a great answer. However, it's not really, it isn't really suggesting it. We're just saying that that's something that could happen. So A is not a great answer, but let's keep it on the table. B, they imply that accepting the author's argument will help his audience achieve greatness. That's not what it's saying, actually. It's not implying that at all. So that's a bad answer. C, restate the author's argument in order to provide a fitting conclusion to the passage. No, it's not restating anything, actually. So that's not really a good answer either. Or D, they urge a change in attitude that should follow logically from the author's argument. So D is the correct answer, and if you read the passage, D would be a pretty obvious correct answer. The challenge with a question like this is that if you didn't fully understand the passage, to get an answer like D would actually be very challenging. Because D, if you understand the passage, is all about that passage being about how people are born and how they can change and grow greater, and how the passage trying to argue that things aren't necessarily inherently unfair, but people can all grow to success. And that's where the people metals comparison comes from. And here it's saying how it urges to change in attitude. Again, it's not restating or implying. The implication isn't there, and it's not restating anything. So A and D were the obvious correct answers from the start of this. It was just whether or not it was A, suggesting the certain limitations, or D, whether they should logically follow from the author's argument. But even so, why would the author suggest their own limitations? So D is without a doubt the best answer there. So that's everything for Unit 4 of AP English Language and Composition. Hopefully in the next video, we'll be talking about argumentative essays, the third essay on the AP exam, and going more into that. However, I hope this helped you better understand Unit 4 of AP English Language and Composition. And I'll see you guys in the next one, but please post below what other ideas for videos you want to see, what you guys need help with, and anything like that. Aside from that, I'll see you all in the next one.